What you're looking at is a TRW customer service pencil. Now, when a company is doing well and it's growing, they don't care how many pencils anybody takes with the name on it. And not a lot of people, they take a few pencils home, no big deal. All right. So anyway, as the company levels out and it starts having some quarters that aren't as good as what the main company wants, they start cutting back on things. And one of the things in our department was they cut back on pencils. And this is the exact pencil. It's a TRW customer service. Uh, it might be a number 2 or a number 1. It's got a weird symbol. Anyway, they cut back on them. So I started going for lunch. I'd go to Ornello's, get my thick pizza, thick crust pizza once a week. And then I'd hit Drug Fair and I'd buy a wad of pencils. And they have a big wad of, I think they were Dixon pencils, number 2s, with the eraser on the end, a block for under $1. So I would buy them and bring them back. Another thing I used to get was I used to go to DuPont Graphics and get these Pink Pearl eraser pencils. And I'd have the guys use this for the cleaning the terminals on the circuit boards. I would do it, a few other guys around me, and I would supply these. I would go, whenever I was at DuPont Graphics, they were like maybe 40 cents, 50 cents. Now there can be $20 on eBay. But anyway, I was supplying pencils, an eraser pencil. And I'm sitting there one day and we get called to this meeting. It's one of those gather round meetings. And the boss starts saying, you guys are using $2,000 a month worth of pencils. And I'm like, get the hell out of here. And he starts saying, excuse me. I said, don't even start. I said, ask anyone around here. I've been buying pencils at Drug Fair and giving them out. Every week, once a week, I buy a bale. I said, you're not, I just held my hand up like, I'm not even going to discuss this. And I start breaking away from the group, and the rest of the people follow me. I said, you better investigate this a little bit better. Well, I think he was exaggerating with the $2,000 pencil. I think the paper, Post-it notes, erasers, whatever else, ink, cartridges for certain pens, and then maybe some toner. So for $2,000 a month, that's what they were getting. And the pencils weren't showing up anymore. And they investigated. It turned out to be the guy that was delivering the pencils would come in when the secretary was there, and he'd load up the closet, and she'd sign the thing, he'd take off. Now, at night, our company was always open. You could just walk in there and steal whatever you wanted. It was out in the middle of Fairfield in the corporate center. And people did. People come in the middle of the night, and they would just take an oscilloscope if they wanted or whatever. Well, anyway, that's what was going on. We weren't using $2,000 worth of pencil. The guy was delivering $2,000 worth of merchandise, coming back at night, taking it. And he got caught, and there was someone involved in it in our building. And it comes to the, we find out that he's been using the same material to sell to several people, and then he comes back at night and takes it back. Well, anyway, I was right. We weren't using $2,000 worth of pencils. And we never got more pencils after that. In other words, they were looking to cut giving us pencils just because things were starting to get tough. Company was starting to go downhill. And a lot of the managers, rather than have a layoff, they would cut back on stuff we would use. Pliers, screwdrivers, and then the layoff come, right? But I'm sitting there at lunch. Now, we used to have guys come from other buildings. And same thing happened over there. They had a woman, she had all these units that were almost finished, and they couldn't ship them. They had a problem. So one of the big bosses comes over there, and he talks to the woman, and she says, they used to call it Eastman 9 or Eastman 910. It's a type of crazy glue. Once you open it up, it's got to go in the refrigerator. So the final parts of the production was they would use this Eastman crazy type glue, and she didn't have any. Well, what the guy was doing that supplied their company was he would supply a couple tubes of Eastman 910, and then he would write off a bunch of them that went out of date. And that's what I told you the story about the shrink tubing. Our company, they were saying that certain things went bad just sitting there, which wasn't true at all. But they were writing things off because everybody was working on trying to keep the company afloat, so they wouldn't have a layoff. But we had to lay off anyway. But I just wanted to tell you, that's the stuff that goes on in a company. Now, if you stay quiet and you work at your bench and you don't get involved, you never learn what's going on. Now, I knew myself. I'd go to the girl. I could tell you her name. And she says, I don't have any more pencils. So I said, well, when I'm over at lunch, I'll pick up a few wads. They were blocks held with saran paper, plastic. And they were under $1 for, I think there was 20 pencils in a bale, 25. And I'd buy them. I'd come back. I'd give them out to people. And that solved it. But what was really happening in the company was they were cutting back. They were cutting everywhere. And then we went through this thing with the pliers. We had these special pliers that were $38 a pair. And they were used to cut the pin under an IC so you could lift it up. And they would wear out. And then the one knucklehead boss we had, he tried buying other types of pliers. And he spent more time getting samples. And then one set of pliers, the jaws came off and you could send them out and get them resharpened. That's what he would do. Instead of figuring out how to buy a certain amount of pliers for $38 each, he'd go off on a tangent with one of his great ideas. And he constantly screwed us over. Now, we had large, I think they were 12-inch discs, floppy disk, 12-inch floppy disk, 8-inch, whatever it was. It was a shoe guard. I remember that. And the guy's got problems. He ran out of heads. And the head on it is just like an 8-track head. It almost looks that big. And this is way, way back. So I'm talking to the guy, and he says that so-and-so's sending a bunch of them out to be reground. I go, you can't do that. So I went up to him and I explained that there's laminations in there. The ratio of laminations to the amount of turns of wire are very important. As the head wears, it makes less magnetic field because the lamination is worn down on the head. So Genius takes 50 brand new heads and sends them out to a guy. Well, first he sends 10 heads out to a guy to grind them down. They come back and he made the guy test them. Now, in order to test them, he has to mount it in the floppy drive unit and run all these tests on it. And the first test is telling me he's got low output. And I said to him, watch this. I said, he's going to come over here and tell you to continue to do the rest of the tests, which he did. And at the end, all 10 failed. So then he's sort of remembering what I said. You can't grind a head down. So he took a bunch of heads, maybe 50, sent them to the guy, had him grind down, and every one of them failed. And he's like, these are the type of stupid stuff he would do. And when they finally got rid of him, he bought all this equipment for the company, but he didn't pay for the software. And when he was with the dealer buying this equipment in our place, he says, we have software guys, they can handle it. So he buys the equipment, he shows the equipment to the guys that program, and they're like, we don't program in that modern language. It might have been C++, but they were using Fortran, and that's what they're hired for, was to do Fortran. And then our internal computers for banking, they use other kinds of software that were proprietary. And those guys knew that, but they didn't even know what software this new equipment was supposed to have. So the guy never gets the software. And he's got people changing stuff in the company. I won't be specific. I don't want to be sued. And it just becomes a big brouhaha. And finally the big corporate comes in and they want to know why we haven't switched over to the system. So he tells them, and they're like, you're fired. They fired him. And then he walked around. They gave him 2 weeks to walk around and say goodbye to everybody. And this is the guy who everybody told me, go over and tell him what you really think about him. Because I got involved with him so many times. And he was so stupid. It was unbelievable. But I wouldn't say nothing to him because I didn't know if I'd meet up with him at the next place. But when you work in a big company and you're privileged with certain information, from other bosses. They'd come to me and they wanted to run something past me, technical, and a lot of them were coming to tell me, I'm getting the hell out of here. And the one boss, I should have left. The guy that hired me came up and he told everybody, no, I'm not spending as much time uh, at home with that I should. He was from another state, and he'd only go home on weekends. And he come up to me and he was like hinting to me, I'm leaving. He ahead of time before he made the announcement. And then when he did, I should have left. I stayed with the guy that replaced him. It was terrible. All he did was steal stuff from the company. And years later, they caught him. They got rid of him. They hired him back as a consultant. He's dead now. I can say that. He can't sue me. But in other words, when you work for a big company and you walk around and other bosses confide in you, and you're like, after they're done, you're like, why did you tell me that? Why did you tell me that? I got that in my head. I can't tell anybody else. I don't want it to get around. Then there's always the boss that told everybody the same thing. Don't tell anybody else, but everybody else knows. And those people are a pain in the ass too. But yeah, I was supplying the pencils, and then this guy called a meeting. What a jerk. And telling us we were using $2,000 a month in pencils. That's a lot of freaking pencils. Pencils were real cheap. I don't know what they are now. But anyway, that's the stuff I've gone through. And, a boss would go, I'd be going out to lunch by myself, and the boss would go, can I go along? And then you sit there with this boss, and he's opening up all this crap to you because he knows I'm not going to squeal. I'm not going to tell anybody else. And I knew stuff ahead of time. I told you the one boss would hand me a sheet of paper. He says, these are 20 underperforming people. Circle the ones we think we should get rid of. He did that like 3 times to me. And of course, when I'm going down that list, I see people that I know are terrible, and I want them away from my face, And trust me, I can walk up and I can look real sad and I'm saying, really sorry you're going, and almost be laughing inside, because at the end when they weren't going to let me go, I had to quit. But in other words, you got people in there that when you get rid of them, the production gets faster. They laid off 20 guys one time, and our production doubled. And it wasn't funny because I'm sitting there and they're coming over to me, hey, we got rid of 20 guys and our output doubled. I'm like, yeah, because they were dead wood. They slowed us down. I won't go into that. But in other words, there's dead wood in every company. But at some point, a guy gets so old and he doesn't care. And the company's carrying him. And my boss would say to me, oh, someday you'll be like that. I said, the guy's over there reading a newspaper. He's backed up on printers. I said, well, we only require them to do 1 printer a day. And they could have it done by 10 o'clock in the morning, and they would listen to that money guy on the radio. I can't think of his name offhand. But in other words, that's what they were doing. They would do 1 printer. And then later on, they wanted a printer and a half out of them. You want to see these guys crying. And they'd melt down whenever they got behind for the day. I can't think of the guy on the radio. And none of them had any money. And I had money. And one day, they kept telling me, you got to stay liquid. You got to stay liquid. That's what the thing was at the time. And they come over to me. And I said, do you guys got any money in the bank? No. Well, why do you listen to that every day? Well, if we had money, I'm like, and I had money. I was single. I bought my sister's half of the house. My father left me everything. I still gave my sister half. And then I bought half the house from her. I bought half of my own house. Let's put it that way. But in other words, you have these guys and they're repeating these buzzwords that this investor's talking about. And they had no money. Was it Bill Breslin? I think it was Bill Breslin. Oh, Bill would tell you to do this, and Bill would tell you to do that. I'm like, leave me alone. I'm working all kinds of overtime. I'm shot. I'm totally freaking burnt out, and I didn't understand what burnt out was. Now I do. And when you burn out, the next time you feel better, you get another job, you burn out even quicker the next time. Each time you can handle less stress because your body just wants to bail. And it was horrible. It was absolutely horrible what was going on. And the big bosses would walk out. early in the morning. I'd be in there before the place opened. Walk over and they start telling me, I got to lay off 30 people. I'm like, why would you tell me that? When you can do it? Well, maybe next month. I said, so I got to know from now until next month that somebody's going to get laid off, 30 people. Yeah, that's the thing where they know they can tell you and talk to you about it, but they know you're not going to squeal. Now, probably what I should have done was I probably should have squealed, and then they would never confide in me. But I didn't think about that. I just think this guy needs someone to talk to. That's why I like Drew Carey. When that guy comes out and he gives him a big spiel and you're fired, and he gets rid of him. I think that's it. But I just wanted to tell you the stuff I've went through, and a lot of you have gone through it too. The more you put yourself out there, the more responsibility you take, the more insanity you have to put up with. And I mean, it's total insanity. I'm retired. I'm 72. And you look back on your life and you're like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I put up with that. I can't believe I stayed that long. You know, you watch the Good Techs. I can't tell you the guy's name, but once they promoted him up, all the Good Techs said, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. And I realized that. And they bailed on me. They bailed. I lost some of these really good guys. And they went with another company, and they were making really big money. But then that guy did something. He embezzled somehow out of his partner or whatever, and that all came crashing down. So they left a comfy place that I was at, and they would have still been laid off at the comfy place, the first place, because we were the #1 repair center in the I think in the United States, maybe the world. TRW, it was a repair center. You brought your circuit boards, your computers, and then the first thing that hit us was Western Union, who was getting out of the telegraph market, or they would send telegrams. They were still in business. They turned every one of their depots into a repair. In turn, you bring the stuff in there, and then they send it out and got it repaired. So overnight, they had more locations than we did. They become #1. We become #2. The people running our company got nervous and made a bunch of mistakes, and it ended up, dying. But TRW was Thomas Rayamo Waldridge. They were 3 guys that bought underperforming companies, or companies that just needed some advertising. So they bought up all these companies and they turned them around. They made them more profitable, and then they parachuted out. They all took millions of dollars and left. They left it with this other company to run it, and it just went downhill after that. But when I first got there, we had a ping pong table. You'd be sitting there working, and one of the bosses would come through and say, "Get up and go play ping pong." You've been sitting there. Every time I come by here, you're sitting there working. And then as it changed, the boss would come by and say to me, "Where's so-and-so? Where's so-and-so? These guys, they're not playing ping pong. Where are they?" I said, and then one day I couldn't take it anymore. I say, it wasn't my turn to watch them. And the boss got really mad at me. I said, look, I'm not management. So they made me a group leader. And group leader is babysitter. And you got all these people that bitch and moan that they never moved up in the company. And people got mad at me over that. The one guy told his wife that he was going to go to school for Olivetti. And then they called me in the office. And I said, "Isn't so-and-so going?" "No, he's too much of a baby." He said, "We told him he might be going." And then he acted like an a-hole. "And you're going." And I had to go, that last video showing you, I went to Olivetti School. It was Olivetti School and TRW School. Let's put it that way. And all the schematics were in Italian. And it didn't bother me one bit. A schematic. Takes you a little while to figure out what some of the symbols are, but I was able to fix the Olivetti stuff. And then when I quit, they packed it all up and went to Texas. The guys took one look at everything being in Italian, and some of them quit. So I've been there, done that, and it's like people tell me something like, I'm showing you a transformer just to show you there is an isolation transformer you can use to make high voltage. And then use another transformer for your filament, and now you can run a tube circuit. and they're both transformers will be very cheap versus the giant one, and it's more versatile. And it's almost as, all the colors aren't all the same between different companies or whatever. And I was like going to argue that all the main top transformer companies, black was the primary, yellow would be some type of filament, whether it was 12.6 or 6.3. The red, and then the red with the yellow stripe or black stripe, that was your center tap. That was high voltage. And then the two green wires are to light the filament of the rectifier tube. Every transformer I ever pulled out of something had that convention. I was taught that convention in school. And yes, the isolation transformer, they use two red wires as the primary, and they spell it out on the side of the transformer. That's why they did that. It's just, yes, there are a few companies that don't go with the convention. But back in the old days in tech school, they would basically tell you that two black wires are primary. And also, if you know how to use an ohm meter, you put it on the lowest scale. You put the two leads together and zero it in. And then you measure them. And you'll know right away the filaments are real low resistance. One high set will be the high voltage windings. They could actually be higher impedance than the AC input to the transformer. You got to bring something to the table. You just don't shoot from the hip and say, well, not all transformers have the same colors. Well, if you're at that level where you're messing around with transformers, the colors of the leads, you should know how to use an ohm meter. You should know some of the basics. And like I told you, I went to tech school, and there's a lot to learn in tech school. And a lot of the guys by the second semester didn't remember anything they learned in the first semester. It was fun, and they would raise their hand and ask a first week question. And the poor instructor would lose his freaking mind. He'd turn beet red, make noises, and run out of the room and go smoke a cigarette. And then the guy that always would ask him a stupid question would run out and torment him even more. I could tell you that guy's name. What a flake that kid was. But I've seen it all. And you're sitting there and you say, this can't be happening. This can't be happening. But it is. And I see it even in the neighborhood here. You're walking around and you see some of the stuff that people do, and you can't believe it. There's one house here. They changed the windows 3 times since I've been here. The windows would fog up. They were thermal panes, and they got cheap ones. And 3 times they've changed the windows since I've been here. You just can't believe the stuff you see. And some of the stuff that the person got, the one guy got a hot water heater, and it had not a thermocouple. It's got a compressor on top of it. It's got a heat exchanger on it. It's a hot water heater. It's got a heat exchanger. And after 3 years, it started beeping. And it wasn't making hot water anymore. So he called the guy up. They weren't in business anymore. Called the company up that made the hot water heater. They weren't in business anymore. So for 5 more years, they really didn't have hot water in the house. And he would tell me, yeah, it's still down there beeping. But I had to keep hearing about that hot water heater. Why, it was a special one. It uses a heat exchanger. And I'm like, that thing was like really expensive. It never paid for itself. Right? It never paid for itself. Even if it went for 12 years without needing to be repaired or changed, it would never pay for itself. I think that's it. All right, that's it.